Hello. Alright, so this is going to be a continuation of the last video that I made, basically talking about Pluto. So going back to Pluto and going back to all of the things that I was saying in the last video, essentially what Pluto is the concept of legacy. So when we're born into this world, we, in a sense, get a piece of everything that our parents have, whether they want to admit that or not. Meaning that you have some form of inheritance that comes down. Whether if we're talking about money, whether if we're talking about care, we're talking about literally the aspect of genetic lineage and genetic inheritance, heredity, either their trauma, whether you inherited that through living and coming across your own sources, then they correlate to your parents' trauma, or if your parents directly traumatized you the same way that their parents traumatized them by refusing to change. But in some sense, there's a sense of embedded inheritance that we get from our parents. So Pluto is the concept of legion and transformation. So you'll start to think necessarily, so how do things transform, or why do things transform? Well, the things usually transform in conjunction with other things, meaning that a lot of the time, trauma and all kinds of other things happen because of external forces that completely derail a person from their virtue, or in a sense destroys that quality of it. So in the mental faculties, when a person's ego, or an aspect of that character that they are kind of goes away, there are, in a sense, alters or different types of personalities that's almost exactly similar to theirs. Or you can basically just say this: the person starts to begin to change. So what I genuinely believe is that based on scenarios and things that they go through, different DNA codons and things like that are activated, which causes different behavioral patterns depending on their environment and their perspective to their environment or their focus. So we kind of store and pass genes based on the things that we do the most and the things that we primarily focus on. Alright, so the focus aspect, that would be a concept or a faculty that would be given to the astrological sign Leo. But I'm going to get back on that later. So how the way I came to that conclusion is that everything on this planet is its own, is a marker of an identity of something. So everything that you see is just a fragment of something much, much more bigger. So it's so big we can't even see it because we're part of it. So it's literally like the cells in your body looking at the outside world and being like, oh, there's a whole nother world out there. At that point, I personally think that you would transform, or your body would necessarily die, because then those things would try to get out if they achieve that type of sentience or self-awareness. So I'm not saying they're literally like that, but it's a cool way of necessarily thinking, because then you can kind of look at us and our relation towards the planet from looking at that. More so, we're literally created from the matter of this earth, and we embody all of the same principalistic aspects that all of nature in the animal kingdom has. So it's like we have that as a foundation, and then we have all of the other things that we pass down through our experience and then growing. So you basically being born, all of those things are passed down to you as an individual. So in a sense, the archetype of all humanity, in a sense, to a degree, is the seed that grows into the tree. But that's just a symbol of the energy. We don't know what tree we're growing into, because we're the thing that modulates, or the process that goes through that. So that's why we have two dualistic natures. We have an internal and an external world. So our internal world is based on what we put from our external world, and our external world is created based on the things that we think, feel, and act on from our internal world. So that's a more so balance within itself. But with this whole concept of Pluto, and I'm just rambling because this is the whole purpose of me making this thing, is just to get these thoughts out to try to make sense of them. But from what I've seen, like the whole concept of Pluto, you have so many different archetypes that came before you. So you have so many concepts of past lives or past biological body lives. Because remember, if you just take you and see what you are, you're essentially your mom's body. And then your mom's body was your mom's body. And then your mom's body was your mom's body. So all of her fears and all of those things are still passed on to you. And all of the behaviors and everything that happens. Your father is more so the genetic blueprint. So in a sense, you can say your father can function as necessarily the sun or information that feeds the necessarily body via sperm cells, and your mother is the actual genetic material that actually makes those things up. So in a sense, it's like the feminine aspect can be molded, and you can see that with the earth that we actually live on. The earth is feminine. It's very beautiful. We actually change and we can do all of these different things towards it, but from what we see, our way of life now is not in accordance with Earth's natural laws. They're in accordance with the natural laws of nature and animals, but animals feed off of Earth. Those are two different things. So their world is going to be predicated or based off an aspect or a fragment of Earth's world, but Earth itself, we're still learning what the hell a planet and all of these things actually are. When you really think about it, we just come from observations and just have recorded history. We don't know the full cycles of Earth and all the things that happen and how they affect us. And we still don't even know how the other planets and everything affect us as well. So it's like this background completely governs a good portion of what we are and what our actual purpose is if we do not know what those things are by nature. Meaning that we don't operate solely off of necessarily feeling, but we operate off a weird mix of feeling, emotion, and action. And we kind of, in a sense, get kind of confused because we're not totally in the process of doing those things. We can stop, take ourselves out of it, change our environments. So in a sense, we don't really have a direct sense of what are we doing actually here. We're just trying to basically survive based on us observing animals and biological frequencies. And just the aspect of if we don't do something, then we see the consequences of it. Like if we don't eat and take care of ourselves, then we die. And we see what happens when you die. You rot and go into the ground. But we don't know if that's we don't know if that's supposed to happen or not. We just know it's based off of the feeling of it's not supposed to happen to us yet. But then when you start to think of your worldview and everything like that, death becomes scary because your worldview says that it's bad, even though everything on the planet dies at some point, or it in a sense leaves this mortal cocoon to become something else that we can't even comprehend because we don't have the biological faculties to see into that other realm. Meaning that we can create tools, we can do all of this stuff, but I truly believe that no matter what, we will not be able to see in what that realm is. And that's the whole purpose of us living necessarily. We come down into this world to kind of, in a sense, grow and expand whatever the hell we are, then go out, and then we probably are reincarnated and just come back as multiple different things. Because like kind of what I see, like the body is necessarily recycled from reproduction and procreation to a small degree, or a fragment of the body is recycled and the old shell leaves. So it's more so it's like when you have a kid, that's both of y'all fused as one, and then eventually you guys are going to die and that kid is going to be there. At least the natural order of life. That's how things are supposed to be. There's nothing more tragic than a mother or a father burying their kids. My mom told me that, and I truly believe that's one of the most tragic things one of the most tragic things we can experience. So us being the archetype of the seed and everything like that, seeds have automatic identities to grow into something. So a seed is born from a tree. So a seed grows up to be a tree based on all of the things that are unified and bonded with it. So in a sense, if you look at the sun is the highest point of something. Everything kind of grows that touches the sun to a degree. So everything already has an identity, and the sun is kind of giving it information to kind of grow up to that, and we are just experiencing all of those things in real time. So being like that, the seed or Pluto that's in necessarily the soil, it has its primary function is absorption. So when things get absorbed, it gets pulled into itself, and it basically takes in nutrients and things like that until it charges up to a certain degree, and then it transforms or becomes something else. So the concept of Pluto basically is these things all are bonded towards each other, and then once they're bonded towards each other, they become a seed, and then that seed begins to grow towards its identity of the more evolved version of that based on the environment. I don't want to say always say evolved because that's leading into the theory of evolution, but it's a sense of things change from one thing to another to adapt towards its environment. It doesn't necessarily mean that one thing is better. It's just when the environment changes, we change with the environment as well. So the seed basically gets water, gets all of these different types of things stuck in the soil, and it basically fights its way throughout the soil to basically grow into the world and express whatever identity it's supposed to be. So whatever flower or tree or being or creation that's supposed to exist here, it always starts off as something small, volatile, compact, and basically disembodied. What I mean by that is that it doesn't have a true identity. It just basically functions off of all the things that are inside of it, and then it makes choices and begins to actually grow into whatever it's supposed to be. So basically on these choices and everything like that, it all comes down to kind of, in a sense, a state of attraction. So what attraction basically is, and basically all of nature, is just that it's something taking something else that it needs, bonding with that to become something new, which essentially is the concept of Venus. So Pluto and Venus work hand in hand to a degree, or they're kind of opposites. So in astrology, you see that with the two planets, with the two signs, Taurus, which is governed by Venus, and Scorpio, which is governed by Pluto. So Taurus and esoteric things, from what I've seen, it represents a state of consistency to a degree. So if you look at the archetype basically of, it's a cow. So if you look at what we do with cows and everything like that, it's the archetype basically of the Garden of Eden or the world without struggle. It's basically peace, a sense of unity. It likes to be around things that are just like it. So from the Venetian aspect, it's the whole aspect of uniform predictability and consistency, which there's nothing negative about that in any way, shape, or form. That's basically, when you look at the ever-changing world, that's just basically permanence and comfortable permanence. So Scorpio is a sign of just rapid transformation. So how the way these things work, you can see these things through all of our stories that we kind of look at. You know, stories like Beauty and the Beast, the story of Hades and Persephone, a lot of the female hero stories where they take a crazed, some type of dude that has some aspect of good in him, but they have a whole lot of monstrous aspects, and they, in a sense, from their interactions, he kind of grows up, matures, and becomes a better human being altogether. So it's like the animal being raised into a human to a degree. So how do those energies necessarily work in nature? Is the energy of necessarily absorption and bonding based on attraction, and that's based on two things that need something that it wasn't born from. So in a sense, Pluto or Plutinos or all of these little fragmented parts of nature, they all need to be part of a community of something to grow and make their identity. So remember, in the world of Maya, everything is made up of multiple different things that are constellated, and through our perception, they're perceived as solid. So it's world within world within world. Pluto is the aspect of all of these things going towards each thing to unify into that world. Venus would be the concept of all of these things balanced, unified, and working perfectly harmoniously within each other, thus making them beautiful. So it's like you take basically a person who looks a little funny or an outcast, or it's the story basically of the ugly duckling growing up to be the beautiful woman. You know, it's all of those things that would consider disgust or the underworld or the grimy, dead, and harsh, uncomfortable and unbalanced aspects of life being thrusted into a more sustainable, beautiful, balanced, productive aspect. So I'm gonna make a video about Venus as well to fully explain that. But basically, Pluto seeks to unify with Venus to become whole. So based on the concept of Venus, Venus follows certain aspect of beauty. So what beauty is the aspect of two things that are completely opposite found in there, or the two. It would be the two opposite ends of the same spectrum. Is the better way of me saying it. So being the two opposite ends of the same spectrum would be things like love, hate, or love and indifference. It would be, no, you can't have one thing without having the other. So it would be good, bad. It would be basically ugly, pretty, hungry, satiated. All of these different dualistic concepts that give a certain sense of beauty and harmony and things like that when you look at them through a holistic lens. So it will be basically two things becoming whole, thus becoming beautified, because it's getting closer and closer towards whatever identity it actually is. So Pluto seeks to find that. And Fibonacci, in the Fibonacci sequence and everything like that, there is a spiral that is within nature. That is partially a mark of Venus as well. So what happens in that spiral is that one number is necessarily created, and that number is then, I believe it is added or absorbed the number before then to create another number, and then a spiral was made creating off of that. But that spiral basically is like the mark of just nature that you see all over. It's the mark of just like the signature. You see it in your handprint, you see it in hair, you see it in how the way leaves twirl and fall to the ground. You'll see it in how the way a vine comes out of the soil and grows. It will constantly turn and turn and turn and turn and turn and turn, kind of almost like a clock to a certain degree. So the plutonic seed starts to act like this, and its roots will begin to necessarily grow, extending deeper and deeper into the necessarily ground or into the earth or the underworld. So when that necessarily happens, it's released, and that seed fights through soil or the Saturnian force to actually breach the surface and become whatever it's supposed to be based on its identity. So if I take that concept and you transform it over to a human being, I would say the first 15 to 20 years of your life will always be struggle, because that is you as the seed creating your own sense of identity by breaking through Saturnian soil, metaphorically, or the parents and all of society that prevents you from doing that once you integrate it into the rest of the world. So it's more so it's like you're your own individual, and you have a sense of environment around you that's trying to make you exactly like the environment, which your personality is the creation of you resisting that, taking your own inner world and trying to apply that towards the world, changing things to give it a sense of meaning. So Pluto has so many different archetypes that comes out in society, basically, because the human brain can't decipher what's real and what's fake based on its feelings and everything like that. Emotion is the force that causes us to degenerate and bring out all of these different archetypes. And what these archetypes are just previous states of being passed down genetically throughout time immemorial. They come out based on ritual that happens when you're focused on something that resonates with whatever part of that is within you. Like if you have a wife, you will want to protect your wife because your wife is connected to your sense of procreation. So if you go back throughout all of time, life was extremely hard and brutal. One of the most relieving senses of being was the aspect of familial bonds and sex and bonding with a significant other. That thing was necessarily for survival, and it actually helped relieve a lot of the stress and tension from life itself. Especially when you're sitting there fighting all kinds of crazy things and you're fighting for your life on a daily basis. Now, when one individual can do something, that thing is not as needed as it was back then, but it's still present, and it comes out in so many different ways. So when a lot of the times with men, or a lot with women too, when there's a threat to necessarily you and your lover, and anger comes out, which can lead to a violent impulse if a person doesn't have enough self-control. A lot of that is a sense as residual energy that is left over from when we lived in societies and when we fought for survival 24/7. Meaning like we had to fight every damn thing. Like we fought the environment, we had to basically fight hunger, we had to fight our inner impulses, then we had to fight all kinds of animals that hunted us down. So it's like we had to integrate the bestial aspects of our own nature in order to protect the, in a sense, the significant other that we have that causes us to procreate, to live to a degree. So a lot of the times, from what I've seen, that's kind of like the male's hero story to a degree. You know, they save the damsel in distress and everything like that. That's more so the animal male story. Us being human beings, we have the ability to raise that to a higher frequency, meaning that we don't have to participate in those things in that way. We have free will and free choice to actually date and integrate and focus on other things. But based on what I'm trying to get at is that most of the things that we are attracted to are just animalistic survival mechanisms that are only present because as a planetary force of humanity, we are traumatized, meaning that we are not functioning out of the primary highest form of what we are. So essentially, we're saying our natures is that of a sickened cancer cell to a degree, meaning that instead of making the body better or trying to do other things that bring out the higher natures, we are essentially just accepting that we're this thing and letting all of us die out based on animalistic impulses instead of using our higher faculties that animals do not have, like our imagination, our ability to perceive, our ability to actually see, feel, and experience different things, make sense of the world, and then take history and take it outside of ourselves. Our ability to actually have grace and temperance and all kinds of things like that. We kind of just throw all that shit to the side and just be like, you know what? It's a fuck you. I have to get mine. And we base all of that on a primary fear of death on our perspective. So because we believe that there's nothing more, and I mean, we kind of believe that subconsciously, or we're forcing ourselves to believe that, we're willing to do any evil based on whatever feeling inconveniences us as a species. And then we call that higher nature, and then we think we're supposed to do that while praying towards a god, when it's like, you know, you venerate what you are. So it's like, if your cells venerate certain things where it's like they're just focused on their own cellular activity rather than their highest form of, you know, we function a certain way to make sure that the body maintains homeostasis, we're kind of just fucking ourselves. So I know I'm rambling in circles. It's getting kind of late. So I am going to come back and touch up on this because there's a lot more that deals with this whole Pluto concept that I've been really thinking about and kind of been looking at. But essentially, like, this is the archetype of the animal to infant, and it is the seed, the thing that basically grows from all of the things that's passed down from it. It's the raw aspect of transformation that comes and changes every little thing in the world, and everything in this world is transformed. So essentially what it is it's a process of nature. But what happens is we kind of lose our sense of identity, so we don't look at it as a process of nature, and we just worship the degrees of which is presented through archetypical means. Meaning that, going based on the concept of the dead and everything like that, how do you store genes? You store genes based on focus. Focus is a concept of repression and expression at the same time. So it's more so of you maintaining a sense of awareness on a certain thing through repression while expressing something and doing that thing at the same time, or giving that thing awareness, expression. So repression is the force that basically causes things to necessarily degenerate. It's the force of basically holding things in place, or you're holding something that's trying to come out. So repression is the force that basically dams rivers and things like that. When you put a pan on a stove and everything like that, that force is also a sense of, can be looked at as a sense of repression, through the aspect of the pan is retaining the heat instead of releasing it through another means, or at least in an instant. It's something else. I know it's something else instead of repression, but it's just a way of me looking at it. So the way you kind of look at the world is like, we kind of give all of these concepts to the world to decipher laws, and then we apply those laws that we create towards the world. But we got to the point when we stopped kind of looking at laws and we just look at the old world instead of trying to figure out more things, because at the end of the day, like, the material world is finite, and energy is in a sense infinite, meaning it changes from one form to another. So there are other forms of actually existing, but we have to actually look at, but we can't do that if we're still fighting the concept of the dead, or the old patterns of behavior and things like that gets activated through ritualistic bullshit that happens. And when I say ritualistic bullshit, I mean actual ritual, and I mean just occurrences that activate certain things that would happen in necessarily nature. Like, a loved one passes away, so you cry. You fall, so basically you are hurt and you say something to release pain and everything like that. All of those things are things that you can just look and it's like, one thing leads to others, cause and effect. Pluto also works with Neptune, meaning that in actual astrology or astronomy, Pluto and Neptune's orbits are very, very closely linked. So if you look at basically the whole concepts of Pluto and Neptune, what they are is, Neptune will be the next video. Neptune is the concept of rhythm, emotion, and water to a degree. Pluto repressed things, blood, lineage. There's things that there's information in the blood that goes all the way back to time itself. So Neptune, or the emotional force, that will be the thing that necessarily comes through and activates all of those different DNA codons based on the intensity of it. So in a sense, it's like Neptune, or water, is the water that waters the seed. So if you look at the archetypes, basically Pluto and Neptune, or Poseidon, they both have basically trident. One's a 3-point trident and one's a 2-point trident. 2-point tridents are basically frequency forks that retain information, and a frequency is basically a sound, feeling, or vibration. So Neptune's pitchfork is a thing that basically sends the vibrations out. So what it basically is that I look at that as that emotions and feelings will reach to the core of who you are, and they will activate things that are stored within your body but that are not truly of your identity. So more so, certain feelings and certain frequencies and certain vibes that you get can make you go back to certain previous aspects of your behavior, thus putting you in another loop, which essentially will then make you dead. So meaning, like, when you're stuck in a behavior that you can't change, that's in a sense a pattern, or a pattern of the dead. So you don't have free will or choice, you are just activated based on ritual, impulse, or vibe. So your environment governs everything about you. And from what I've seen, that's what I see the entire world as right now. We're so traumatized that we can just predict all of our behaviors based off of 4 distinct patterns: fight, flight, freeze, fawn, and I believe there's another one. So based on all of that, it's getting late. This was my 4th video. I'm going to come back into Pluto. Next video is going to be Neptune, and how Neptune and Pluto interact with each other. And those concepts. So, alright, thank you for listening. Have a good one.